episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast, one of the coldest episodes of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. And it's as we're recording it, it's the day after the saddest Mardi Gras on record. So, wah, 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 wah. But anyway, actually,
sad trombone.
But it will be, next year will be better. That's just what it is. But man, I tell you, seeing, footage of, well, first of all, we drove down St. Charles, yesterday looking at some house floats. Because I took a couple hours off of work. And then, of course, seeing footage they were showing, down St. Charles towards the French Quarter. And then you see shots of the French Quarter. The Marigny is just like, it's a ghost town. It was a ghost town yesterday. It's weird. Now, Fredo, you've been here the longest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how weird was yesterday?
Okay, so here's what's interesting.
And carnival season in general.
Yeah.
Just how weird was it?
Overall, it's probably as a whole package, it's together one of the weirdest carnival seasons ever. We've had washouts on Mardi Gras Day. I remember being on the parade route 13, 14, and it just, the storm just came on down, and me and my brother, who were standing out saving a spot for our family, had to duck into an awning, and he was wearing this brand new t-shirt, and all the color ran out because my mom hadn't pre-washed it. It just turned him a beautiful shade of blue. So it happens. I've had Endymion Saturdays where can't get to Endymion because there's literally a storm.
Yeah, but there's still thousands of people who do. That's the thing.
Well, that's my catch. You, even without the parades, you can still have Mardi Gras. In the quarter, people still come out. You may still have other events happening. The weather will limit some of the events, but it won't limit all. Yes, it was a conscious effort to say no. We're nothing big. I mean, I love the fact that Skull and Bones Gang came out at 5 o'clock in the morning. Skeleton Crew came out. A lot of the Indian tribes came out and did their usual thing. They did not promote it, celebrate. They didn't make a big deal of it. People kind of found that as they came down the street. So, and then of course everybody was doing the house float thing, which was awesome. So there was ways to still have a little bit of carnival spirit, but in ranking all of them, this one far and away weirdest one ever.
Now, you saw the Indian outfit that's taken the place of the pedestal at Norman C. Francis, where Jeff Davis once stood. I thought that was awesome.
Passed by it twice. There was sufficient enough of a crowd that I didn't want to stop and take a photo of it. Get out of my car and take a look. But I saw it. And I love the idea. If there was a way to make sure nobody would mess with it, I would love for it to be there all the time.
Yeah, that's the catch though. So.
Yeah, I don't think it would hold up to the elements either. Is the problem? It's like that box wasn't super weatherproof, and we walked over there today. It was already taken down.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I understand why, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. In Armstrong Park, there's a statue to the Mardi Gras Indians, and I mean, I'm not saying relocate one because that it needs to be in Armstrong Park just because that's the birthplace of jazz, and there's such a linked history between the two. But yeah, I mean, having another one right there, or we need to bring back the statue of Pikachu.
For a few years back.
Yeah, I never understood why that one got taken down. It seemed pretty inoffensive to me, Pikachu.
That was awesome. So,
did somebody buy it? Is that it? Is that why?
I heard they were auctioning it off, but I don't know. It's a mystery unsolved. If anybody knows, we'll interview the person on our podcast. What the creator of the Pikachu statue?
That would be a good scoop for us. Yeah, I'd love to know more about what happened to the Pikachu statue.
Dave, is that your dog or my dog?
I guess yours.
Man, I don't know who's invading our house then. So, okay. Well, cool. Well, yeah, like I said, it's now begins Lent. I gave up Lent for Lent, so I don't know.
I told a friend, I tweeted to a friend today, look, So much has already been taken from us. I don't have it in me to give up anymore willingly.
Yeah.
Actually, what begins today is the month-long countdown to St. Pat's.
And that's the thing we were talking about. It's like, I mean, the bar is so low now. All I want on St. Patrick's Day is to be able to go into either Finn's or the Holy Ground and have a pint of Guinness, maybe play some tunes with a couple of friends. That's all I want. It's like I don't actually, I never really like a block party anyway, but it's like the parades obviously aren't going to happen, but I would not be surprised if we don't see another, oh, we're closing down the bars for another weekend. um, but
Yeah.
who knows, jump off that bridge when we get to it.
We're officially into the season of this is our second annual thing we're losing because we didn't lose Mardi Gras last year, but we lost St. Pat's, we
Yeah.
lost French Quarter Fest, we lost these things, and now we're heading into our now we've lost two, and that hit me the other day with St. Pat's, and that's tough.
So yeah. But like I said, we'll keep thinking positive thoughts, and maybe who knows what will happen. Numbers are dropping. They're in. It's so, knock on wood. I won't knock on wood because the dogs will go nuts. Um, but before we get into the topic tonight, by the way, we're going to be it's going to be kind of a serious topic for the Who Dat Jedi podcast, but it's all about the situation around Gina Carano not being a part of the Star Wars family anymore. And we're gonna end the kind of the situation around that and a little bit broader um, conversation about the whole thing. But let's start off with some fun, as always. We'll start with some trivia. And hey, you know what I got on my desk? Because I cleaned up my desk, guys, and now I actually have my reading glasses, so I'll be able to read these better. See, so old man glasses go on. All right. And see, then I can look at you like this. It should be a video podcast because I'm looking over the top of the rim of the glasses. You know what you got? Okay. Sorry. I digress.
Doing the old librarian look of looking over the glasses.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah. Because if I try to look at you through the glasses, I'll get sick. All right. So anyway, Dave, who confides to Qui-Gon, I am betting heavily on Sebulba? I wouldn't call it confiding, but whatever. I mean, he didn't say
Watto,
like,
right?
Let me tell you. Yes, he's going to win, I think. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good impression.
I'm sorry to everybody. Yes, that was Watto. All right. Da, 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 da. And Fredo. Who wails that navigating through an asteroid field is suicide?
Ooh. I'm gonna go with 3PO.
I'm sorry. The answer
Princess
is
Leia.
C3PO.
Ah.
No, I'll give it to
Yeah.
you. I'll give it to you. Fine. All right. Yes, it is. It's 3PO. Which, by the way, I still say one of the funniest moments, most underrated moments in Empire Strikes Back is when C3PO hugs Chewbacca when they're starting to dive into the asteroid belt. All right, so here's mine. First one to look at. Who asks a sputtering and smoking R2-D2, why did you have to be so brave? All right, so I'll get the correct answer here. It is C3PO. So, man, Fredo and I both get a 3PO question. Dave gets the Phantom Menace. All right, so everybody feel warmed up. Let's move into some news.
Okay, so first things first. You remember a couple of months back actually, back when Tony Gilroy was unable to start filming for Cassian Andor series, they tapped Toby Haynes to be the director or directing a few episodes. Well, earlier in the week, last week, they announced that Ben Karen and Susanna White, two other directors, are joining Andor as directors. Ben Karen, who's been known to direct episodes for Skins, Sherlock, The Crown, whereas Susanna White directed Nanny McPhee Returns, has directed episodes of Generation Kill, Billions and Masters of Sex. So it seems like it's interesting. It's at one point there was the point of view that Tony Gilroy was going to be series executive producer, showrunner, and director, and now it's more like nope, he's handing the directing duties to other directors, and he's kind of overseeing the whole thing.
Cool. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm scanning through some of the stuff, but and kind of linked to Andor. Didn't there
Mhm.
get not kind of linked? It is linked, but kind of linked to the story. Isn't we got more clarification on Alan Tudyk and K2SO? He basically he made it sound like he's coming. It's just not right away. So he kind of confirmed that it was a couple days after we had talked about it, but
Right.
so
And I believe, let's say, so they're expecting Andor to come after Book of Boba Fett. So sometime mid 2022, spring 2022. Uh, and then it's going to be 12 episodes. So it's interesting. They're confirmed both sort of a release date period as well as a, a length for the season.
So, okay, so this was brought up on somewhere else. I can't remember, but I'll ask you guys. I don't know. Again, just a tangent. If you had the opportunity to watch like the entire season one or entire season two of The Mandalorian in a movie theater, would you?
I would.
Now, then I got to thinking, it's like, wow, if we could, if you didn't charge anybody, then there wouldn't be any you wouldn't get thrown into copyright jail. So maybe we could have like a Who Dat Jedi podcast post quarantine fun night. Get somebody to
Yeah,
sponsor
because
it. No, I'm just thinking out loud. You can edit this out, Dave, but I know that'd be kind of nifty. Because some of these things, what I guess what I'm getting to is that these aren't just like, okay, we're making a TV show and we're just going to get, you know, some schlub straight out of film school. They're getting people to do this and do this right. I mean, so that's this is I mean all movie quality stuff.
yeah,
We've
and
talked.
then go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say we've talked about it on the show before that they're sort of training people in the visual language um, with the show, which if they understand what the mythos is and how you shoot these things and all the technical side of it, then it's like, okay, you've shown an aptitude for this. We can give you a feature at some point. And so, like, I feel like it remains that as well. It's a really good proving ground. But to your point, Aaron, like they're not bringing in the rookie
Yeah.
either.
Hey,
So
Aaron, you wanna direct an episode? Yeah. Um, the other thing too, we talked about WandaVision last week, and as much as I'm adoring WandaVision, more so than I thought I was going to, uh, you can tell very much that that is a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's kind of what they're going for, just with the whole WandaVision thing, but it seems to be more on par with Agents of Shield than it does The Mandalorian. I don't know. Am I just snooty here, or I mean,
No, I think particularly this last season, second season, we made a point to to kind of reflect on the fact that it felt like a bigger story just told in pieces. Like you could go from the chapter 9 to chapter 10, chapter 11, put them together, cut out the credits, and it would all flow seamlessly by and large. Maybe a swipe or a cut or something in between. Whereas I think even the season one of Mandalorian felt more episodic, felt more like, okay, we've reached the end of this adventure. I think there was a concerted effort to make season two feel more seamless. So I imagine that if you were to put it on a big screen and show it all at once, it would flow rather easily.
so sorry, I took us down tangent road there, but
No, it's all good. It's all good. Speaking of tangent roads, if you want me to move on,
everybody
uh,
has to have a role to play. Okay, go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Go on.
uh, so yesterday was announced, or a few days ago was announced, that Charles Soule, who's right now working on the High Republic stuff, is also going to be writing or anchoring a comic book series through Marvel for Boba Fett. It's going to go Boba Fett War of the Bounty Hunters. It's supposed to be a crossover event across all the Marvel Star Wars comic book series. And here's what Charles says is the synopsis. He goes, Boba Fett clearly doesn't take Han Solo directly to Jabba's palace. So this takes place at the end of Empire. Something had to happen in between that intervening time between Empire and Jedi. And I was like, I would like to tell that story. And I would like it to be about Boba Fett and what happens to him. So then he goes, there's a little bit of a preview of the art that artist Luke, let me see his name, Luke Ross, is working on for this, because it's going to be, like I said, 5-issue miniseries, and then some of the other characters are going to be cutting in from the other Marvel comic series. So it's like Boba Fett's in possession of Han Solo at the end of Empire, and at the beginning of the first issue, he's not. And he's going to do everything he can to get him back. And that's going to involve him taking on Jabba the Hutt, Black Sun, Darth Vader, and a few other factions. So it's supposed to be coming out in May of this year. So I think you still got the Marvel app, don't you, Aaron?
I do.
So there you go.
All right. So let me get this straight. This is going to be like the typical, I don't know, 80s sitcom where the basketball gets just tossed from one bounty hunter to another. It's keep away with Han Solo. Is that what's going on?
Well,
that's what they should call it, is keep away with Han Solo. But it made me think of, you've seen the Robot Chicken where Boba Fett is talking to Frozen Han and Carbonite. It just cracks me up. Breckenmeyer. Anyway, that's all I think about when I think about this. But that's also, I'd have to go back and read Shadows of the Empire again, but part of that story was told, or that a version of that story or whatever, I think. So,
but remember, is Shadows of the Empire canon anymore?
No, it's not canon. No. But
I could hear Michelle in the distance screaming.
I remember there was a big, Boba Fett versus IG-88 thing in there. So anyway, well, no, it'll be interesting to see. So cool.
You have to remember too. We just had this huge Boba Fett renaissance. With this last season, we know the new show's coming out, so this is a perfect time for them to launch a comic in May. It'll kind of like whet that appetite for people who are itching to see more Boba Fett. So.
And Seth Green needs to do a book of Boba Fett.
Robot Chicken.
Yes. So.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, not Star Wars related, but Star Wars adjacent. There was announced last week that Pedro Pascal, aka Din Djarin, is going to be the lead in HBO Max's high-profile adaptation of the Last of Us Sony PlayStation video game. So, for those of you who have never played it, The Last of Us takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. Pedro will be playing the role of Joel, who's a hardened survivor. He's hired to smuggle this young girl named Ellie, who's going to be played by the girl from Game of Thrones, Bella Ramsey, who played the little lady who died at the end of season 8 out of an oppressive quarantine zone. Yeah, no, I know. Look, spoilers for a show that nobody watched. So it starts a small job, becomes a brutal journey through post-apocalyptic America. Go from there. So it's interesting, because that would be, right now they're just announced the casting. They haven't shot a thing. They're not expecting this to be coming anytime soon. I would imagine at the earliest we're looking at late 2022 or 2023. So you got to figure, Pedro's got to be running dual hit TV shows across streaming platforms now.
This is an interesting choice because I've never played it, but it's just renowned for its story, which isn't like typically the types of games that get tabbed for adaptation. They're usually picking things like Doom or Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or Sonic the Hedgehog. So it's like, okay, so let's find a good story this time. and adapt that, something that's cinematic to begin with. And I'm not going to write that off. I think that's a good idea, and obviously good for Pedro. He gets to sink his teeth into another role. Have you played it, Fredo?
No, I didn't play it when it came out. Uh, one of my brothers like, oh, I'll get it to you. I'll get to play. I just never ran into the time. It's a good combination of, if you remember the early seasons of The Walking Dead, and if you were to combine it with something like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, it's a good amalgamation. It's a brutal, like I said, post-apocalyptic America. There's factions. There's these monsters that have been mutated. The game starts off, and I mean, it's iconic for both how it begins and how it ends. But the opening is the day that the world goes to McClunky in a handbasket, and you're playing the role of Joel as you're trying to escape with your daughter, and tragedy befalls you. So again, it kind of colors the choices that he makes along the way when he's trying to uh, uh, lead Ellie to safety. It's being created. One thing I will give it as another feather in his cap. It's being adapted by Craig Masson, who was the creator of the Chernobyl miniseries from last year.
This is all
So I don't know if you
sounding
guys.
really uplifting. Let me tell you.
I know exactly. I know if you remember Chernobyl last year, that TV miniseries. Everybody's just like, it just leaves you feeling down and depressed. And now he's going to be making a TV show where, Pedro Pascal and Lady Liana Mormont are trying to get away from monsters and other factions. Yeah, I can. It's going to be hurtful. It's going to hurt.
I'm gonna say this is a far cry from Mario Brothers, but
Mm-hmm. So if we want to get into lighter, happier Star Wars news, uh, there was an interview done by Sarah Wilson from, I'm trying to remember what her, she works for USA Today. Anyway, she interviewed Ryan Johnson. She actually interviewed both Daisy Ridley and Ryan Johnson. But during the interview with Ryan Johnson, she did ask him, and he did confirm, does his Star Wars trilogy is still on? No dates or timelines because he's working on other projects. Like right now, he's working on the sequel to Knives Out, but he says that it is happening. She actually even asked him about bringing on Daisy Ridley or Adam Driver or John Boyega to Knives Out 2. And he's like, look, I got less time to work on this than I did the original. And then she asked him about Raylo, and he confirmed that it was supposed to be a romantic thing. So, eh? But yeah, if you're still expecting the Ryan Johnson trilogy, it's not. It hasn't been canceled. It hasn't been forgotten. It's still happening.
yeah, well, it shouldn't have been a romantic thing, but oh well. I saw I saw it was John Hoey from the Resistance broadcast. He retweeted something. It was like, but when this whole thing came out, and he said, he said, I'm of two minds. He said, one, I'm so excited to see what. He retweeted somebody's tweet. Said, I'm so excited to see what Ryan Johnson can do with his own trilogy. He said, then I'm also fearful of having to hear all the people on Twitter just railing against how awful it's going to be. But because it's, and so hopefully maybe there will be enough time will pass that the heat will come down and people will be a little bit more open to it. I think he'd make an incredible trilogy.
Yeah. If you've ever seen any of his the work that he's created, whole cloth, whether it's uh, Knives Out or Brick or I forget the name of this time travel movie that he made with
Looper?
Looper.
Looper. Thank
Yeah.
you. He is very creative. He knows how to put stuff together. I wonder, give him free reign and the opportunity to actually plot beginning, middle, and end.
Well, that's
How
the
come
thing.
how much better it'll all come together.
That's the God. We talked about it a gazillion times. I mean, he told a smidgen of the story, and the story was never even fully fleshed out. So to give him, yeah, like you said, beginning, middle, and end, then we can see. I think then it would be fair to say, yeah, Ryan Johnson can make a Star Wars movie, or no, he really can't. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
so Yeah, no, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, jury is out on that in a way because a lot of people blame JJ for the disjointedness, and a lot of people blame Ryan, and truthfully, it's probably a little bit of both. And it's really more Disney's fault than anyone else because like this trilogy didn't come together in the way that a lot of people wanted to. So I think like even if you were like horrifically disappointed with Last Jedi for any number of reasons. I think some of those opinions can be valid, but when you talk about like it not seeming to fit within that trilogy, then I'm like, well, okay, I don't know if that needs to be levied entirely at him. And so, yeah, I'm with you. His other films have turned out great. They tell coherent stories that have really interest have they typically have an interesting way of coming together at the end, which is what you want. You want it to come together in a way that makes sense, but you can't see coming a mile away.
And imagine if you did have like a Star Wars meets Knives Out, like a Star Wars mystery.
Mm.
I mean, it would be it'd be kind of a interesting thing.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun. I like the fact that the shackles are off. You're not in the Skywalker trilogy. You can do whatever you want. You can go wherever you want. When the timeline can be different, you can be in the far reaches of space where you're not interacting with any of these previous entities. I mean, you can do whatever he wants with it. So I'm still personally, I'm still excited for it as well because I think he's an incredible filmmaker. And I really hope that it comes together and it happens. But uh, I'm I'm also not I'm not like pinning all of my hopes on this one interview where he can say whatever he wants in this one interview.
And that's part of the dynamics of the reality of Hollywood movie making. I mean, all directors have pet projects that they walk away from, come back to, walk away from, because they're either hired or get the opportunity to make something else. Right now, the only three things we know are confirmed are Road Squadron, Taika Waititi's movie, and Kevin Feige's produced movie. So that's it.
You know,
Now, that only gets you till about 2028, 2029. Beyond that, it's open field.
Dave, to your point, you just said where he can. It's in his interview. He can kind of say whatever he wants. I'm gonna I'm gonna disagree a little bit there because I work for a technical writing company that we contract with with. I write help center articles for a company. My company does. This is going to be weird. So my company A, writes. We're contracted to work with company B, but it is stated clear as a bell that we cannot say that we work for company B or we do, you know what I mean? There's just because
your
subcontractor
has been hired. You're not an employee of the contractor.
But what I'm saying there is that I would think that Lucasfilm would probably frown upon anybody just saying, "Yeah, I'm writing a new Star Wars trilogy," even if he did The Last Jedi. But I think that if he was just to say that to now if he said it, sitting in a bar, and he didn't realize, somebody was sitting next to him, that's one thing. But he's talking to a USA Today reporter. I mean, it's probably. I mean,
I'll rephrase then. I mean, like, honestly, like, my point isn't like he can say whatever he wants to anybody whenever, which, funnily enough, is going to be a theme of this show today. But, I think, like, honestly, what I was trying to convey is that
until Lucasfilm says that, hey, Ryan's doing this, yeah.
These things shift over time. He may feel at this point that the thing is still coming together. Disney may feel entirely differently about whether this is going to actually eventually happen or not. They could be in totally different stratospheres, or even if they're on the same page at this point, things can change a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from. So it's like, I'm very much of mind. Let's wait until the scripts are written and they're ready to go into pre-production
and being leaked online. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, in reality, I mean, and it's not just from his point of view, but even the corporate financial point of view. Disney may be in that position where precedents change. There's shifts in the pressures at the top, and they may say, "No, right now we really can't make that. You're ready to go, but we're not ready to fund you now. This is Disney; they got everybody's money, but even they have to go at some point. We can't just green light everything all at once."
You know what bothers me is that when
Mhm.
reporters don't follow with the obvious follow. So I
Mhm.
mean, it sounds like it's like, so are you writing? Yeah, are you still doing the Star Wars trilogy? Yeah, I'm still doing the Star Wars trilogy. And then that was kind of it, you know. The obvious follow is, okay. Now I know you can't give specifics, but do you have a story already in mind? Have you already, put down some thoughts to paper?
Uh,
Because then you're going to be able to kind of suss out the BS a little bit. But
I will defend her only in this regard. She did tweet out, she would know afterwards. She's saying she had 3 hours worth of questions and only an hour's worth of time. So sometimes you want to get into those cul-de-sacs and down those rabbit holes, but you don't get them because you're not going to get that much of an access to an interviewer or an interviewee in this case. You're only going to get so much, and they're usually talking to them for a specific reason that they want to get back to, and they'll only
yeah,
humor you for so long.
quit being reasonable, Fredo. Come
I
on.
know. Look, and Dave can talk about that way better than I.
I would have probably filled, personally, I would have let my own feelings get into there, and I would have probably filled at least 50 minutes of the hour with Star Wars questions. But, oh well.
Well,
I'm not saying 50 minutes. I'm saying go with the obvious follow because, like, I mean, but to your point, it's like he can say whatever he wants. Like, yeah, I'm still making the trilogy, and everybody goes away happy. But if you ask, oh, cool, do you have a story in mind? Then they're like,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
no, or if there's no hesitation, it's like, no, I don't have a story in mind yet, but I'm still going to do it. Then okay, this is going to be a while. Or if it's
Uh,
like, yeah, I've got thoughts now, I've got an outline, you might get a little bit more. Then you can move on to talking about Knives Out too, whatever. Search
well,
for
that's just it. I
Curly's
mean, he's
gold.
working right now on writing Knives Out too. So I would imagine if he even has any idea of what that trilogy is, it's a faint idea. It's nowhere near. Let's go make this sucker. Because I mean, he's gonna after the experiences of Last Jedi. I think he's gonna want. And this is just me speaking for myself. He's gonna want to have everything kind of sort of mapped out so that when he gets it all together, when it gets all put together, it all works.
So
I
since
think that's a really good point. That the other point too is that he knows that the fan base is divided about his movie, this previous movie, and he will catch an enormous amount of flack. And I think like that from Disney's perspective, I think that's the reason why they haven't said we're locking you in for 2022, buddy. I think they want some of that ill will to kind of fade over time, and that would be why they're not like pressing forward on a rapid timeline with this. That would be my guess. But again, like you said, he probably wants to get that story locked in too.
he's got such a sense of humor that I would not put it past him to say, since he dropped the thing, how he confirmed that the Raylo thing was actually supposed to be a thing. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this new trilogy is going to be Raylo meets 50 Shades of Grey fan fiction. So taking Star Wars down another avenue, then watch
Mm-hmm.
people's head come unglued.
So anyway, so that's it in terms of news, except for one bit of news. So we want to get into it.
So, and we're a little bit late to the party because this happened after we recorded last week, and other podcasts have talked about it. And I think we might go down a little different angle and not dwell too much on the specifically Gina Carano, but Gina Carano got herself shown the door by Mickey Mouse.
She got
And
fired on her day off.
you know, it. But the most the proverbial straw on the camel's back was making a Holocaust reference joke. Not even a joke. She
Would
just
you would
she
you like
said,
me to would you
or
like me to read the way that that Variety wrote it?
well, I mean,
Just to kind of
yeah. Go ahead. I mean, yeah.
so yeah. So basically, the way that they write it is this: Carano shared these posts on her Instagram story, late Tuesday night. One of the posts she shared compared today's divided political climate to Nazi Germany. Quote, Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where the Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? End quote. The extrapolation there being made uh, that being conservative, Republican, whichever side of the spectrum, political spectrum you put that group on, is equivalent to being a Jew in Nazi Germany, which
So
I believe that some.
we're gonna have to have an intermission in the Who Dat Jedi podcast for everybody to go get more liquor to deal
Yeah,
with some of this. But and by the way, folks, we're not going to. This isn't going to be a both sides type of a thing. We come down, all three of us, firmly on one side that's just effed up. Pardon me.
I always remind myself that I forget who said it. Said the moment you bring up Hitler in any or the Nazis in any discussion, you've already lost because that's like the end of the discussion. So
Right, okay. So let's just take it on that part of it. It's like, you know, I don't know. I learned many moons ago that I don't even think I was probably old enough to drive before I knew that you don't make Holocaust jokes. I mean, and it's like, and when you see politicians compare things to, also they'll compare things to gulags and to, you know, I understand hyperbole, but some things are just like, no, you don't, you don't. Some things are, I know South Park has had episodes where it's like, okay, it's now, there's been enough time where we can now start making jokes or we can start making references. I would think, sorry, the Holocaust is, no, there is a line, and that is way out in another parish.
yeah,
So, but
yeah,
what compounds this? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that it wasn't like this was just some drunken tweet, a one time deal. I mean, she's done dumb things like this in the past, and I do want to preface this first of all. I'm going to say this: I was excited about the Cara Dune character, still am, and I was excited for it to be Gina Carano at the beginning, and then we started, seeing her true colors, and it becomes a little bit difficult. It's like you grow up, and it's like, I really like Grandpa, and then you're about 12. It's like, man, Grandpa tells some kind of, those jokes are kind of a little weird. Then you realize Grandpa's a racist, and it's just like, ugh, I don't want to go to Grandpa's house anymore, and so it gets a little tough. But I mean, but she's made other things. It was like, she made in her Twitter profile, when people are using, putting their pronouns, um, in their bios, and she put beep boop bop, and apparently at that point, Pedro Pascal sat her down and explained to her basically, why that was crappy, and explained to her, the whole transgender, you know, uh, just
Okay, yeah, can I take that down for a second?
yeah.
Because like the news broke before this news broke about a week and a half ago. A little article came out about Pedro supporting his trans sister,
Yeah.
and um, and just like what that meant because of the country that they grew up in, where you could get dropped out of a plane above the ocean if you didn't meet a certain criteria, by the government. These are the kinds of things that would happen there. And so for him to actually just come out and be a voice of strength and support and resolve in that way. I mean, it was like, it just shows you what an incredible person he is. And so you contrast that with, I'm going to make fun of the whole, trans space right now, and what what a lot of people are dealing with, and what a lot of people are trying to be sensitive to right now, because for years and years and years and years, it's just like either a butt of the jokes or it's not something we talk about, right? We finally come to a point in 2021 where it's like, okay, let's be a little bit more broad-minded, let's be a little bit more accepting, and Pedro's at the forefront of that, and yet she's out here making fun of it.
Well, and he actually, and again, knowing that, I mean, I know it was he. He
And
actually,
man is the star of the
he
show
actually
too.
took,
So
he
like,
actually
let me
took the
make that
time.
clear.
He actually took the time, back then to sit down with her and try to
Yeah.
persuade her and, and educate her and to be patient, where most of us would have been like, man, you're lucky you didn't get decked, I mean, so
And just to say right quick, Aaron, the fact, I mean, as somebody who is from Latin America, I can tell you that they're still very reactive, very negative, very angry, and very regressive points of view towards trans people in Latin America. I can tell you stories from people that I know who've lived there, who've been there recently. And so the fact that Pedro's sister felt comfortable enough and felt supported enough to do it, and the fact that he, having the platform that he has, supports her so willingly, it's such a breath of fresh air and such a strong and positive thing. And and here's the thing, you're right, he has every right to have gone to Gina Carano and goes, what the heck, girl? What's going on here?
yeah,
But
kick
no,
her off
he
the
took the
show
time
now
to,
or I'm walking, but no,
right, he
he's,
took the time to embrace her. And she, I mean, to her credit, she did listen to him. But then when he came out uh, to say it, she simply said, "Look, it's not for me, but I'm not gonna put you down for doing that, for saying so." But I think the bigger problem for Gina Carano is that this wasn't the first. This wasn't even the second. She had been running numerous times where she posts stuff online that then she takes back and or has to delete because again the Jews are in Nazi Germany the same thing as conservatives in America right now. Posts got deleted within hours. There was another post making fun of masks wearing that got taken down. So in other words, she was promoting some of the the stolen election conspiracy nonsense a few months back. So she had ample time to recognize, wait a minute, what the heck am I doing to my career? And she
and
blew past all of them.
all reports are that she was actually, in Disney's office, in Lucasfilm's offices a couple weeks ago, like apologizing and yeah, boy, yeah, I'm sorry. And then, that lasted long. So, I, I mean, let's pause and this is one of the kind of in the universe, questions that I had, or just things I wanted to bring up. And it is not, it's not an excuse by any, standpoint, but I'm sitting here thinking about, man, if back when we were growing up, how many of the, how many movie stars, TV stars, whatever would have been, run out on the rails had social media been around at that point. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm sorry. I see your expression there for a second. There's a lot of people I know grew up loving Kiss, and Kiss was the best band they've ever seen. Their music is not political whatsoever. But then they went and saw them at Gretna Fest a couple years ago, and they wouldn't play an encore until everybody did the Pledge of Allegiance, and they
Okay.
went on a little bit of a conservative, hoo ha. I mean, then it's like, so I mean, so again, those I just wonder, does the social media platform for artists, does that make it more difficult for them? I mean,
I will say,
and I will say, it's one thing to say I disagree with, drilling in Alaska than it is to say, you know, trans people are awful. You know, that's, I mean, that one is, yes, a political policy thing that we can talk about. The other one is about being a dirtbag to other human beings. So I do draw a line there. But what I'm saying is that, you know, it's, does, if she would have
I
just stayed off social media, would she still be Cara Dune and everybody would just be fine living in ignorance?
probably yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
And like
Let me.
it's a business decision. And it's like this is something Fredo mentioned to me yesterday, which is just like at some point your liability becomes such that she pisses off enough people, you lose enough subscribers, and she becomes a problem,
Well,
and then
if you're in a
you have to
band, you go to,
address that problem.
yeah, if you're in a band, you go play it, you know, have a gig at a venue, and then you keep pissing off the customers, and people aren't going to come, you know, to that bar, then they're going to not hire your band. So yeah,
Mhm.
keep going, Dave.
So
I
I'm
she's
sorry.
mean,
been given this rope, she's given a rope to hang herself, essentially. It's like that's what social media is for a lot of people now. It's like I'm going to put a bunch of political stuff out there, and like I'm going to get a lot of likes and retweets from a certain crowd, and I'm going to get a lot of other people who are like, I'm never going to consume your media ever again. And it becomes an issue for your employer if you end up hurting their bottom line. And like this is why people think freedom of speech, but I think they lose sight of the fact that these are private companies, these are businesses. They're looking to make money, and they're looking to do what they think is best for their business. And so Disney, um, in their current state, believes in inclusivity, and so like this is going to be a thing for them continuing going forward. Conservative voices, I use quotation marks, are going to have a hard time fitting into that culture if they feel that they must express more radical viewpoints like Gina has been expressing. And for her, again, I agree with you, Aaron. You draw the line between I believe in smaller government. I believe in drilling in Alaska. I believe in this. I believe in that. Versus, you don't have a right to exist.
Right.
And like, I think like there's a difference there, and there's a distinction to be drawn. But she was trending with the latter.
Yeah. You
yeah.
know,
And
and
just to go.
I do want to say, you know, to your point, Dave, about, you know, it's like, you know, when you're saying freedom of speech stuff, I mean, when I was a teacher in, you know, conservative town, Nebraska, you know, I knew that, you know, it's why my social media posts, I've trained myself to just post about my dogs and Star Wars and music. You know, it's pretty benign. Um, and, you know, had I been a teacher in Big Blue Dot, New Orleans, it would have been a, you know, different situation, you know, depending on what, you know, school I'm in, because, you know, my wife feels free to speak her mind and to address issues that, you know, we wouldn't have necessarily felt, because in our contract, yeah, the school district could say, you know what, you don't have a job no more. So yeah.
I guess what I was going to say is, when I was making those faces, I agree with you in this regard. Yeah, if Kiss or Mickey Mantle or the president back in
Walt
the
Disney.
40s, 50s, 60s, if those Walt Disney, if those people had social media access and no filter between themselves and their audience, yeah, a lot more of their stuff and their views and their odiousness may have come out, and we would look upon them differently. Also, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that times change. Back then, some of those positions may have been in the norm, and now they're clearly not. What I always say is social media is a two-edged sword. It allows you to connect with the world, but it also allows the whole world to come into your head if you let it. And that's why it's important to either, if you're somebody, look, none of us are famous. If the worst is we're going to do harm is to ourselves or to our immediate families, we send something wrong and we lose our jobs, that kind of
I
thing.
want to pause you for a second, because
Mm-hmm.
because you have been recognized by your voice as being a part of the Who Dat Jedi podcast, you, my friend, are famous. In somebody's world, you are famous because they heard your voice. Who Dat Jedi podcast. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. I appreciate it. Hello. Anyway, uh, but the reality is when you reach a level of fame or success, like somebody like Gina Carano, who is a world famous MMA fighter, she's been in movies, she's been in TV shows. That a lot of famous people turn that over to their agent. They have a media person. They hire somebody on the outside to manage this. They don't do it themselves, or they limit their social media to nothing more than, hey, my new movie's coming out. Hey, come see it. It's coming out on DVD. Why? Because they recognize that there is a limit, there is a danger to it, that if you're not cautious, you may step over the line into something you shouldn't have. What I'll also add is that Gina Carano got told by Disney in the stories that come out, stop doing this. Pedro Pascal said, try to educate her, try to guide her back, and she still keeps doing it. So she felt comfortable enough within her point of view to continue tweeting stuff out that basically cost her a job and a lead role in her own TV show, because that's what Rangers of New Republic was going to be.
Yeah, no, that was her show.
Mm-hmm.
That was her show. Like, they built that show for her. Let's not make any mistake about that. The reason that wasn't announced when they had their big hubbubaloo with the investors and everything, because she had already shoved her foot into her mouth.
They didn't announce her. I mean, they announced the show.
Yeah.
And that's
But they didn't announce her because she'd already shoved her foot into her mouth. And so, like, this was an ongoing issue for them. And I feel like this show that had originally been a vehicle for her was like, she seems to be pretty popular. People really responded to her in season 1. Well, what if when we're doing a spinoff show, let's come up with our spinoff ideas. Hey, we could do a show based around her. That's great. So they do it. They start the development of it, and she starts shoving her foot in her mouth. So let's not make any mistake about what she has given up, because I've seen some spin since. Oh, she's already got a movie deal with like Ben Shapiro or somebody. It's like, this is a death knell for her. Yeah, exactly. Weigh those things against one another.
Right.
This is a death knell for her career. It's like, you can try to spin it any way that you want, but like, this is not a good situation for her. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I feel bad for her, because honestly, at this point, I don't. When she'd been warned multiple times, you have to. I have an employer. If my employer comes to me and says, Dave, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this other thing, well, I have the freaking survival instinct to say, yeah, you're probably right. Okay, I won't do those things. I mean,
yeah. And I guess. So we're sorry, everybody. We're going to be jumping around all over the place because just the way this conversation is. So here's the thing. First of all, the who I feel sorry for are especially the new, I'm the little girls who like fell in love with. We've got a butt kicking strong female character in Cara Dune, and they see. It was like us. We saw Han Solo, but we knew that was Harrison Ford. So they were starting to put character and actor together, and then to find out that they're this way, and it's got to be deflating. So what I really hope, I know what I've talked about. We've talked about recasting and stuff like that before, but this is an instance where you recast that. You recast it, you find another butt-kicking, strong, female to keep the character of Cara Dune, because the character is awesome. It has a lot of potential. It doesn't have to be Gina Carano because she was in a couple episodes in season 1 and season 2. I mean, how many? 8 is enough. Had 2 different Davids, so I think we'll all be fine.
But I'll say, one of the advantages, and you could see kind of where it is, we kind of mentioned this. Season 2 introduced Bo-Katan,
Yeah,
introduce
that's the other
Casca.
thing. There are other butt
So,
kicking women in
so in
that
other
show.
words, if you need that role filled, you do not need to bring
Yeah,
characters back.
you got Katie
Yeah,
Sackhoff, you got
Sasha
Sasha
Banks,
Banks, you've got heck Ming Na Wen,
you know,
so
you got Frog Lady.
that's right, Frog Lady. Um,
But the point
Frog
being,
Lady!
you have other strong female characters in your just this TV show that you can build upon and go forward with.
yeah,
And
and
it's
I'm
always
with you.
like,
I'm totally with you. But again, I've been to the conventions
mm,
and I've you started to see little kids dressing as Cara
right.
Dune. They've made a connection, so I just hope you know I would have no problem if they recast it. But you're right, they have tons of other and you don't need her to advance the story of the Mandalorian at all.
Mhm,
You
right.
know, um, so
They could go either direction. I agree with both of your takes. Like they could recast her and it wouldn't bother me, and they could also just be like, oh, we don't even need to deal with that. We'll just
so I wouldn't want to. I hate to use. We're going to delve into the part of the Venn diagram that's talking about, or that's talking. No, maybe not Venn diagram. But we're going to start delving into something that might touch on to what people are calling cancel culture, which cancel culture is not a new thing. I mean, I've told the story. I said, Brittany and I, we exercise our right to, when we can, to spend our money at businesses that are not crappy. Um, and it's, for example, if we're driving down the interstate and we need to get gas, and if the gas station that's coming up is BP, we'll drive by. If now if we're on a sliver amount of gas, we'll probably still get the BP gas, and so we're not stranded in BFE someplace. But it's or we it is a sense. It is also a point of privilege that we can we're not going to go to this grocery store. We're not going to go to this fast food chain. Um, some people don't have
Aaron,
that. Right?
I'll interject briefly. That's an easy reference for any of us to understand living in this part of the country, but other people who might live elsewhere, the BP oil spill was right off the coast of
Yeah.
Louisiana. And it was an awful, awful situation. We all had headaches for days, and it just
From the smell.
pollute. I mean, it was that close, and it polluted the Gulf, and it was just a catastrophe. And I'm with you. I'm in the same boat.
And
I
so
try to shop
and so
apart from BP.
and so even more recent history, the owner of Rouse's Grocery was at the rally right before the storming of the Capitol, and so people in New Orleans, there's been a conversation about don't shop at Rouse's,
Hmm.
and there's a part of me that, I mean, okay, yeah, I get that. That's kind of I don't want my money supporting somebody who's going to support that, um, but then okay, so what about the 16-year-old kid who's working the checkout lane? What about the or the single mom who this is her third job to put food on her, on the table for her kids, and it's like, so what I guess what I'm getting at is like, now there has been a conversation of, because Gina Carano is in season 1 and season 2 of The Mandalorian, and she's you know has garbage beliefs. Um, should we pay a subscription to Disney Plus? Should you know? Are we going to start seeing season 1 and season 2 of The Mandalorian being taken off Disney Plus at once season 3 comes in? You know what I mean? It's like, where does that? I guess I'm going to throw that grenade out there, and
Well, it's interesting because it'll go both ways too. Because there are going to be people who support her that will think, I need to boycott Disney. And there's going to be other
correct.
people who are like, I don't want anything to do with Disney because I find her so detestable.
Can you separate? I guess is what we're talking about here, because in the Mandalorian, the character of Cara Dune is like nothing like what we get from the actor. So can you separate the artist from the art? That's the other big the other big kind of conversation. I don't know. Where do you guys come down on that? When you come across, let's just not talk about just Gina Carano, but any artist, any actor, are you able to separate? For example, can you listen to Bill Cosby himself, which was one of my favorite, albums growing up, knowing what he became?
What he was, right? It's difficult. It's a difficult line to draw because it's one that everybody draws different. I mean, I'm just thinking as you're saying that, looking back on The Usual Suspects or Seven, and can I enjoy those movies because of Kevin Spacey being on them? And I was,
Well, I'm going to pause you for a second.
hmm
I mean, God, who is the,
How about Michael Jackson?
how about Josh
right.
Whedon?
hmm
Josh Whedon is,
Joss Whedon, right? Avengers and Firefly and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Serenity. Yeah, I mean, if you're any kind of geek from the 90s, 2000s, Joss Whedon was a heavy influence on you growing up. And
or the Kevin
now,
Smith movies, because Harvey Weinstein, funded those things. Yeah,
right,
and takes a lot of money for that. So I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I'm just saying there's a
you know,
lot of things that we enjoy, that that
made by people we would
that has
detest.
dirt. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and look, this is a difficult line. It's not there isn't an easy answer. There isn't a one size fits all answer, and that's what makes it so difficult because it's not as if we're asking people to respect points of view that they don't respect or agree with points of view they don't agree in order to enjoy a piece of media or a piece of art. Art tends to at some point get a life of its own and separates itself, but at the same time, your feelings towards that art can always be sort of clouded by your feelings towards the artist. Like I said, can you enjoy Thriller and play it every Halloween? And in the back of your head, there's some of the accusations levied against Michael Jackson. Or can you watch, Rosemary's Baby and think of Roman Polanski? Again, this isn't a new issue. So that's why I'm reticent to kind of lump it all in because everybody goes, oh, right now the hot new thing is cancel culture. It's hilarious that it's in the halls of Congress that they're talking about cancel culture. I'm like, no, it isn't. This isn't cancel culture, but it's still the long running debate that we have regarding artists and art and the power that we bestow upon them for creating something that connects with us on an emotional level versus the realities of the person as a flawed, living, breathing human being. You know, and sometimes we don't even have to go to extremes like something like Roman Polanski or Bill Cosby. It could be something far less, serious, but no less hurtful.
And I'm sorry if Congress is going to be really seriously going to be talking about cancel culture, then they need to call Colin Kaepernick to testify. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
because sorry.
Well, and I'll say this for like your Rouse's example was a really good one because that applies to film, right? Because there's thousands of people that work on a movie, and if there's one idiot attached to that movie, the actor, the director, whomever, and you're like, well, I'm not going to watch that movie. This is like, well, you're hurting all of those people who put, countless hours into trying to create this piece of art for people. And so like for me, that becomes a kind of an easy decision to make there, unless it's just somebody I can't even stand the sight of them. I mean, I don't know. Like Johnny Depp might be a decent example for a recent example for some people. It's like I can't watch Johnny Depp anymore, and it's like okay, I get it, but again, there's so many people that put so much work into those movies. It's like I can still appreciate it on that level. I can kind of separate it, my distaste for an individual and still appreciate it on those terms. But when you're talking about somebody who's kind of out there on their own, it's like Bill Cosby. He probably had a few producers, a couple of cameramen, but that was his material. That was him. That's his stuff. I was talking to our friend Mandy about this yesterday, and it's like her take on that stuff is like, well, if I can like I'll do like a timeline in my head, and I'll go back to the earliest point of my knowledge of them being a creep is anything
That's
that happened
that's my
before that.
but
I'll enjoy, but
but
anything that happened after that,
that's my
I'll
exact
discuss.
point. What I was bringing up with social media is that ignorance is bliss. That if
Mhm.
I mean if we grew up not knowing what what these people believed, what they did, we just enjoyed it, it was unless you know unless your favorite your favorite white baseball player came out and used a bunch of racial slurs, you
Mhm.
know you didn't know that they were racist, so you rooted for them on you know what I mean. And so but if you would have known, would that yeah. So,
Yeah, no, I
and
mean,
that's the
like
problem is
the,
that now
Mhm.
because it's not just social media, but because there are so many articles, there are so many people interviewing them, there are so many opportunities for them to let the floodgates open that we are seeing more of the artist than their art. And so it's we don't have that we don't have that veil of ignorance. And I like Mandy's point there. That's, I mean, yeah, it's like, okay, once we get, I can watch up to the Cosby Show, but then once we get past that and I found out what's going on, I'm not going to be, you know, dealing with the other stuff. Yeah. So,
I can haggle the Nick's purses that I've gotten from friends over the years with pride because they all come from before 2020.
well, but
That's
that's the other
that's
thing is that
that's
the purse though was made by Mandy. It wasn't
Right.
made by Julie Lee. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so, you know, I mean, I just don't think it's as easy as well. Okay, so now here's the other thing. It's, the Harry Potter series. Are you guys fans of the Harry Potter series? You know,
Okay, I
yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, and
I
now we
think
find
Dave's
out that
kids are more fans than I am.
now we find out that J.K. Rowling is about as much of a transphobe as Gina Carano, if not even more.
More.
You know,
Hmm.
and so can you would you still hand those books over to your kids to read?
Well, one thing I'll say about this, yes,
And
and I watched Gina Carano
by the way, I
in the
want to pause
show.
for a second for my normal
Yeah.
disclaimer, folks. Just because I asked the question, don't read into what Aaron believes here, because I just those are questions, those are things that people are asking. So I'm helping you work through it to ask the uncomfortable question. I would let people read Harry Potter, and just say, you know what, the author is a dirtbag. Go ahead, Dave.
No, that's the kind of my point. I was like, I watched Gina in season 2 of The Mandalorian, knowing fully well what her politics were, what her feelings were on some of these issues, and still would watch the show. And if she had not been fired a week ago, I would still be on board with watching season 3. I I don't think that ultimately it was something that I needed to see happen in this particular circumstance. I did not feel like she needed to be fired. But I get why it happened. I mean, like, I totally understand it. And I understand it from the company's perspective. I understand it from her co-star's perspective. It's just a shame that she couldn't um understand the people around her's feelings, and that, like, hey, we need more sensitivity in general.
Well,
And
and
she
Disney
couldn't
is
do that.
also Disney and Lucasfilm are also coming off of a rocky year or so of what John
Right.
Boyega saying this was how he got kind of a raw
Treated.
deal. You got Kelly Marie Tran and the stuff that she went through, and and how they, and really not that Disney did any, it just how they reacted. And so I think they're
I,
trying to be proactive, and I think they gave her a chance, and then it was like, all right, no, we can't deal with another. So
and I can give you another example. James Gunn, who was briefly let go from the Guardians directorship because of some insensitive tweets that he put out there. They were like toilety humor and talking about, things that we shouldn't talk about on this podcast. But he's like, yes, I was immature and I was joking, and here's the context for it. Ultimately, Disney eventually decided to bring him back, but it wasn't going to, for me personally, make me think, well, I can't watch Guardians of the Galaxy anymore. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I kind of look at the same way with the J.K. Rowling stuff. It's like those are really good books. Am I going to be looking for extra subtext the next time I read through them? Maybe. It's like okay, so she's transphobic. Let me see if I can pick up on some of that, and the next time I read through there. But again, it's obviously it's everybody's own personal prerogative to decide for themselves, like, which art am I going to consume? And you don't have to consume anything. You can make those choices for yourself. Decide I'm not going to do Harry Potter anymore, and so I'm not going to do Mandalorian anymore. Get it? Go crazy.
And let's also be clear as well, because we got three very liberal-minded people sitting right here talking about this. Let's also be very clear that there is a difference. Like I said earlier, there's a difference between being a Republican and being a dirtbag, hateful person. Because I have friends who are they've said, I'm fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and some people would say that that's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. But that's a reality for them. I know them, they're like my brothers, and I know they don't have a hateful bone in their body. Now I cringe. It's like, yeah, but you still associate with a party that has a lot of people that does. But there's a difference between those people. And Gina Carano has not, really talked about any policy differences. She's talked about human rights, here. And that is, so we're not, so I think there can be conservative people. There's room for conservative people. Well, I loved Home Improvement and Tim Allen until, he started to, spout some of his stuff too. I mean, his stand-up was funny in the 90s. It was, like I said, Home Improvement was a funny show. And then, so.
Now, I guess to answer your question regarding J.K. Rowling, I feel comfortable with, if we were to have kids, my kids reading Harry Potter. No, I can separate the work dictionary, because I think there are great lessons in those books for kids and young teens as they grow up. It's one of the beauties of that series, is that it grows up with its audience. At the same time, though, I'm also not comfortable. I'm like, okay, read the books, watch the movies. That's it. We're done. Okay, we'll go to the park. We'll go to Universal Studios. You can wear a cape if you like. Some people are not comfortable. They don't want to give a cent more towards Universal or anything that might go back to be important to the conference of J.K. Rowling. That's their right. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think the reality is that it's horrible that having the platform that she has, having the voice that she has, she chooses to use it this way. But that is her choice, and that's what's horrible. Sometimes we're what's the old Dark Knight quote? Die a hero, live long enough to become the villain. She has chosen to sort of down this hill to this. She's got to be remembered for Harry Potter and for her transphobic positions, which is kind of surprising. I don't think anybody would have believed that back when the last book came out. But that's the way it's gonna go, and that's fine.
She's rich and powerful, and she feels like she can double down on this stuff, and so she just keeps doubling down on this stuff because she's rich and powerful, and she doesn't feel like she should be told what to do. And I feel like sometimes that's one of the trappings of fame. And that's where Gina has been. And it's like, I can do what I want to do. You're not going to tell me how to run my Twitter account.
Well, you become famous enough and popular enough people start telling you what you want to hear. And you think, well, that can do no wrong. I'm totally in the right. But the difficulty here is particularly when you have enough people supporting that point of view. That's the scary part. That's one of the downsides of the internet. It's that there's no longer somebody on an island. If you have, you can have the most hateful, heinous, vile, horrible positions known to man. The internet will help you find two other people who agree with you
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
And
Now you're a tribe.
and I've also said, because, well, I mentioned Colin Kaepernick a little bit ago, and you heard when that whole thing was going down there, people saying that athletes just need to shut up and play the game and, keep your politics out of it and blah, 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 blah. And I've said it a million times. I said, I think that if you have a platform, that you should use that platform, and use it to, and I
use it for good.
Use it for good and to make the world a better place. Now, there are some people, who would say that, pledging allegiance to a flag is making the world, making the country a better place. But I'm not saying that's me. I'm just saying there are some people that, but however, I think a Pedro Pascal using his platform to talk about his trans sister is educating, the community and lifting people up, putting beep bop boop on your Twitter bio is doing nothing but tearing somebody down. And so what I guess what I'm getting at is that I believe that, if, like I said, if you do have that platform, you should use that platform, but you also have to be prepared for people to disagree with what you are saying. And, but again, I think people are smart enough though, to, like, celebrities and athletes, they seem to be smart enough to read the room. That it's like, it's kind of like the old adage, never write anything down that you can't say in person, never say anything out loud that you can't communicate with a wink. And if you can't communicate it that way, don't say it at all. It's an old thing in politics. I mean, so I think if it's like, I'm going to stand up on my pedestal and say, that trans people are bad. It's like, read the room. You're not going to have, like you said, Fredo, you're going to find a couple people, but you're not going to, that's not going to go well for you. Not in this day and age where we're going.
Well, and the reality is, like Dave said, you cutting off your nose, you're limiting yourself. You are literally, Gina Carano went from being a star in one of the most critically acclaimed, successful TV shows right now, to hyping up uh, a movie that's going to probably debut on YouTube, being produced, by Ben Shapiro, that's going to reach a few thousand people because, yeah, she's going to have her fans who are going to go and pay whatever to see it. But that's going to be the extent of it. And, if you are a creative, you're an artist of any kind of way, limiting your audience because you think that they want to, they only want to hear with this, or, it, it works against you. But that is a choice that she is consciously making. And I think that's the bigger point. She's not a little girl. She's a grown adult. These are positions that she's taking because she believes them, or B, believes that they benefit her. They haven't, but that's what she's chosen to do. So I have no problem with Disney doing what it did because, as Dave said, also, this is a business. This is the business see a line from The Godfather Part 2. This is the business you have chosen. When you are in the spotlight, when you're in the limelight, you're on 24/7. It sucks. You've got to deal with it.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go down that road. Anyway.
Well, I'll ask you this. I feel like, to throw a bone to any conservatives that might be listening to our show right now, is like,
we didn't run them out.
They probably turned it
yeah,
off by now.
Probably long gone, right? But if you're still here and you're still trying to engage, and you're thinking, gosh, man, they're really attacking conservatives, it's like, well, I would ask you guys, is there merit to the argument that Disney's position as being inclusive is hurting the product, is hurting the product of Star Wars, because a lot of people argument against the sequel trilogy in the modern Star Wars era and the content that's coming out right now. It's like, well, you know, this is not the same as the original trilogy. The original trilogy, for me, in my interpretation as a conservative, would be that it's, you know, for me. It's inclusive to me, and I feel shut out in the modern era of Disney. It doesn't feel like it's speaking to me anymore.
And see, I guess my instant reaction is I know that's not your point of view, but anybody would be saying that is that's a very selfish way to look at things. I look at it from the exact opposite, where it's like I realize, man, yeah, I did feel more. It's like when we've talked with Brittany, you know, before that, you know, it's I I felt like, yeah, Star Wars. I felt like it was a place I belonged because, yeah, it was starred by a blonde white guy. You know, I mean, so and so now looking at the sequel trilogy and what Disney is doing, I'm thinking about, you know, all the little kids that I see are who are not blonde white boys, who are seeing, you know, now seeing themselves in Star Wars, and so I think that is if you're saying is it a gamble for Disney to do that, I think that's a good gamble for Disney to take, and I think it's just going to pay off dividends.
And we should be acknowledge, no, we should acknowledge inclusivity does not mean exclusivity. By
Right.
which I mean, just because you're making a product where a particular character or whatever demographic you want to put in is the lead, does that mean that that's all they're ever going to make? It's surprising that one of the beauties of Disney Plus's success, which by the way hit over 95 million subscribers as of January. So the idea that people are going to cancel their subscription now and Disney Plus is going to crater, forget it. They're only pumping out more product. There's such a demand for movies and TV shows, and they're going to have the opportunity to be as diverse as they want to be. They're going to have the opportunity to tell stories in any kind of way, and that's also freeing from an artist point of view. If you're an artist and you're no longer beholden to, I have to tell the same story that George Lucas told in 1977 because it's the only thing that hits. They know that they can go any number of ways, any number of stories. I mean, their number one show is starting a middle-aged dad.
So I'm
That's
gonna
that's what the Mandalorian is. It's a middle-aged dad
now.
with
However,
his adopted kid,
And he's Hispanic.
and he's Hispanic, right?
I'm gonna be Captain Cynical here
Go
because
Captain Cynical.
I mean, well, first of all, one of the first things when I went to work for Google, one of the first things, you know, they said to us, said always assume positive intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, you know, and I that was it was a very good reminder to me at that point, and I still operate that way. It was like when I was a teacher, I heard, you know, this phrase that I always operated with my kids. It was be nice first. And it's like, if you give me a reason to be an a-hole after that, then that's on you, you know, but I will always be nice first, or assume positive intentions. So I'm going to assume the positive intentions that Disney wants to be inclusive because that's the right thing to do. But the cynical side of me says they want to pack their parks. They want to, you know, sell subscriptions. They want to sell toys. And that ain't going to happen if, you know, they continue to make, you know, movies that look like Snow White or Star Wars, you know? So there's the cynical side of me says it makes a lot of monetary sense to, you know, to make things inclusive. That sounds really
McClunky.
of me to say, but and sorry, you're gonna have to McClunky that out. But that's the cynical part of me that says that's why they're doing this, you know, because at the end of the day, they are a corporation that wants to make money, and you don't make money if you know, eliminate, you know, over half of your possible source of income.
But to quote
Dave looks like he wants to kill me right now.
No, but to quote a famous Hispanic spokesperson, why not both? You can make money
you're
and be inclusive and creatively successful. You know, this doesn't say that Disney's having to choose either or. If anything, the lesson from The Mandalorian is you can have both and be financially successful and creatively successful and inclusive.
Aaron, I was thinking about your uh, I had been playing devil's advocate as you're wont to do, of course. I tend to agree. I wanted to get Alfredo's viewpoint out there on that, which is just like, yeah, you don't have to just make movies about white people. And you think about it like from the perspective too of Star Wars tanks in China, and that's a problem. And they're trying to fix that problem, and they like banging their heads against the wall trying to fix that problem. You know, they cast actors of Asian descent in Rogue One. Didn't seem to help. The saga films all didn't do very well there either. So that's an issue for them. And again, like you said, the business side of it is we want to be successful in China. We want to be successful everywhere, and diversity is a part of that equation. And so it's like not only is it the right thing to do, but it also makes good
Well,
business
and
sense.
okay, so and again, Captain Cynical here, and I will say this that another Google story, and this is not a cynical thing. It was when you talk about are they doing it for the money or are they doing it because it's the right thing to do. When I was working for Google, there was a push to in coding, and I don't know jack about coding, but they there's the historical terms for some of this is master and slave, and that's just in the code. Nobody sees the code, but Google recognized that their employees see the code, and they see these these terms being used, and they're saying there was a concerted organized directive to eliminate those phrases from the code. And that's so that is an example of doing because it is right. There's a gazillion other things that Google needs to worry about, but they said we recognize that this is, our employees are seeing this, and we need and they're using these phrases that should not be, that really shouldn't be used in the 20th 21st century, 20th century, or even it shouldn't be used ever. But so they're trying to change a culture, and I just thought that was really kind of cool. And so I'm hoping in positive intentions that Disney is doing this because again, it's because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that's it's kind of difficult because you always kind of recognize that these are ultimately monolithic, ginormous, mega corporations. So always taking their actions with a grain of salt is probably a safe course of action. I mean, like Dave and I said, Disney doesn't take this course of action if Gina Carano is not more of a harm to their profit line than a benefit. If she's still a benefit, they would have found ways to kind of coach her and guide her and ensure that she was still a member of both the Mandalorian and Rangers of the New Republic. The fact that she became a negative, a profit loss or loser for them, kind of says it all about how far she'd gone without not recognizing it. And that's
Well,
just
and the other part of it
mhm,
too is because we talked about this offline. She was starting to go down into Q land, because I
mhm,
remember on her Instagram feed she was at a Save the Children rally, and it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I mean that is like that's the gateway into Q. I mean there's nobody in the world that would legitimately argue that you shouldn't save the children. That's a cause everybody can get behind, but it's the thing that Q uses to get their hooks in you.
mhm,
And so given the timeliness of what she said and what happened at the Capitol, and and her history, I don't think Disney had any choice but to say no.
mhm.
We got it. This is not had had January 6th not happened, then I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I think she would probably still. I think she'd probably be off Twitter, and she probably would still be acting in The Mandalorian.
But as you said
Possible.
again, but those are conscious choices that she made to send out all those tweets and to take the positions. And look, Disney never said don't take those positions. They were very much in a situation where the backlash that it was causing was splashing onto them. You know that, like I said, like Dave said, if your boss comes and tells you, "Hey, Dave," or if my boss ever comes and tells me, "Yeah, we saw a couple of tweets that you sent out in the middle of the night." Yep. Yeah, we're not comfortable with that kind of stuff.
Well, and the thing is,
I would be like, okay, I know better.
And people on Twitter weren't saying, and the stories are being written were not, Gina Carano, co-star of Fast and Furious 7. It was, Gina Carano, star of The Mandalorian, so it's like if you can't separate, if Disney couldn't separate from her, then they're just going to have to kick her to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thing that you brought up earlier too about using your platform for good. And I'm wondering if in some respects, like she thought she was, because I feel passionate about this particular thing. Like if you're getting into the Q stuff, again, I don't want to get up on my soapbox too much, but you're right. That's out there. That's not okay because they traffic in lies, right? And it's all just basically made up. But that having been said, it tends to target a particular type of individual. And I think, Fredo, you talked about this, like wrestlers in particular are particularly susceptible to this because they're kind of on their own. And they're not in a group. They're more out on their own, and they end up getting lured in with this kind of thing.
Yeah, there was an article in The Guardian about a couple of months ago when, because they were looking at the prevalence of Q supporters within the MMA and wrestling worlds, and what one of the people being interviewed says, you got to realize their world is very singular. It's by themselves. They travel by themselves. They take care of themselves. I mean, they're involved with whatever they got to do, and they do have some people, but by and large, their worldview is one of, if I want to succeed, I got to take it from you. If I want to have triumphs, I literally have to get into a ring and beat you to a pulp. And some of that dynamic, some of that worldview kind of colors their perception into believing some of the stuff that will lead them down the path towards Q. And it's, look, maybe that's all made up, but I think it makes a salient point about how we perceive the world and how more susceptible we are to believing some things than others. And it really calls to us to be cautious as to what's being said. I mean, we have the entire world at our fingertip, and we can just as easily reach out and send out a truth that connects with people on an emotional level as we can send out a lie that leads people down the bad path. And particularly when you have the bullhorn that somebody like Gina has, you got to be respectful of this power.
Everybody has to decide for themselves. And again, this is part of what makes America great. And she's like, we do have the freedom to make those choices, and we can say, hey, I'm not going to shop at Hobby Lobby, or I'm not going to eat at Chick-fil-A, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that. And,
so,
that's fine.
Yeah, no, I actually, there's two reasons not to eat at Chick-fil-A. The other one is the long line that you have to sit in when I'm trying to drive down Veterans Boulevard.
In fairness to them, they keep that line moving.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's nothing compared to the lines of Popeyes yesterday during Mardi Gras Day.
Yeah, okay, so
they ran out of chicken.
Yeah, New Orleans sold Popeyes out of chicken, so...
I hear that part of it had to do with they didn't get enough shipment in because of the weather systems, the storms.
Now,
so they didn't get enough replacement. But yeah, New Orleans bought out all the chicken in the city.
Dave, you've had a Runza before, right?
I have.
Okay, so Runza is a fast food place in mainly Nebraska, um, and it's a. I won't explain what it is, but anyway, on in the winter time they have Runza Tuesdays, whatever temperature Tuesdays, whatever the temperature is at like 9 o'clock that morning. Um, that's the price of your Runza. And so this past Tuesday, like the price, the temperature was like -25, not wind chill, but -25. So Runzas were free, and Kearney, Nebraska, where I used to live, there's one, there's at least two. There might be three now, but there's two. But they sold out of Runzas because you just have to buy an order of fries and you get a free Runza. So yeah, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, no, there's the line. Getting back to our topic at hand, is the line that in Clerks 2, when Wanda Sykes and the guy who's playing her husband are
Earthquake, yeah.
when they're at movies, and that's when Randall uses a racial slur and Wanda Sykes comes unglued. And she's like, "No, I'm not taking this food." And her husband says, "You can't taste racism." And but it is one of those things. It's like, I want to, I've eaten Chick-fil-A when it's free, you know, and it does taste pretty good, but I'm not going to spend my money to, so those are the, and sometimes I don't know. It's like, should I feel guilty that I'm eating the free Chick-fil-A? Just like, should I feel, guilty about watching something on HBO or watching the new Harry Potter stuff that's going to come out on HBO Max when I get that for free as part of my, cell
We're
subscription?
privileged, and like we talk about the
Absolutely.
privilege
Absolutely.
of
100%.
we talk about the privilege of being able to say, "Oh, I'm not going to shop at Rouse's now," when it's like somebody else
When I
who's
have a
like,
car and I can go to
yeah,
any grocery
yeah,
store I want. Yeah.
somebody who may not have that option, and then you got the employees there who work there too, and it's like the Chick-fil-A question is very similar because it's like we have no shortage of good food in this city.
Yeah.
And so we're very spoiled. We can make those choices. We can say, I don't need that chicken sandwich. I'll get that chicken sandwich over here instead. A lot of people live in rural communities. They don't have those options. It's complicated. It's a very complicated issue. I mean, ultimately, when you're talking about cancel culture and those kinds of things, where I come down on it is ultimately is that I do my best not to engage in it, because it's a rabbit hole. I'm gonna find something awful about pretty much every individual you could ever name or any company you could ever name, and if you're, I could object to the way they do X, Y, or Z in their operation, or the way they treat their employees, or anything.
Some political position they support, right?
Yeah, we supported this candidate. It's like, well, yeah, they supported that candidate, but they supported this candidate over here too. They're covering the bases. That's what companies do.
Right.
They pay both political parties off so that they're covered no matter who's in power. But I mostly fall in the line of like, okay, so I try not to engage in it, but I also feel like at the end of the day, I don't feel particularly bad for people who have been warned, who've been told, we do need you to do this. We need you to respect these sorts of boundaries, and they can't do it. And they get let go, and that's where we're at with Gina. And I feel like Disney was entirely justified to do what they did. And as you said earlier, I'm fine with whatever direction they want to take the show. If they want to recast or they just want to cut her character out completely, I'm fine with either approach. But I, personally, I am happy that they sided with a person like Pedro, who's inclusive, over somebody like Gina, who is more hateful. And that's just sort of where I fall on in the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I think realistically looking at it, one of the beauties of where we live at the time that we live in is that we can express points of view that not everybody will agree with. That doesn't mean that those points of view have to be correct. That doesn't mean that those points of view have to be lauded. And that doesn't mean that those points of view don't bring consequences. We all acknowledge that part of living in the society in we live in means we're not islands. I mean, especially if this week has taught us anything, is how interconnected we all are. How dependent and desperate we are when things are looking dire and things are not looking good. We need one another for sometimes our immediate survival, as is happening to folks in Texas, uh, or let's say, or for our own mental and emotional well-being. That's happened to many people throughout this city in the time that we're living in. I mean, uh, I was remarking about how important Mardi Gras is for us, just as a mechanism to keep so many people who normally fall into a seasonal level of depression or seasonal depression. Mardi Gras takes that away from them because to some it doesn't give you the time. You just, oh, here comes the ball and you're working in your throws and you're doing this thing, or you're working towards something, and by the time you get to the post Mardi Gras funk, it's you have transitioned out of the seasonal depression period in some ways. But not having that, we relied on those connections, those friendships, kind of keep us going. So I'm always going to be willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. Aaron's pointed out, given the career path I've chosen, I got no choice but to be open and inclusive and hopeful that people can change. So I'll hope that Gina Carano learns from her mistakes. It doesn't sound like she's ready to do that yet. From her last week when she mentioned that the rebellion's just begun,
Yeah.
that was her response to all this, which tells you where she's coming from. Uh, but I think it's important at this point in time to always pick the side of the people whose voices have been limited. You don't pick the side of the people who have had the mic all the time. You have to, this is a time where you can extend to include the stories and the lives, and the points of views of people who've been on the fringes, marginalized. If anything, now it's the time to do that. And whether that's coming from a multi-corporation to just pouring billions into something because they want to get billions back, or whether it's within personal relationships, I think that's important. That's a good point that we're at, and hopefully more people come away looking from all this going like, you know what, she was wrong.
And so my final take, there is two things. One, there's an unofficial motto to this city. We see it hanging in all the shops that you walk in: "Be nice or leave." You
Mm-hmm.
know. But the other thing I just want to leave you with, it also, I think about, like I said, Pedro Pascal sitting down with Gina Carano and taking the time to talk to her and explain to her why X, Y, or Z ain't cool, or try to explain, what trans, what trans people's concerns and desires, and what their life is.
And
And
to appeal on a personal level
right,
because
so
Mm-hmm.
it's he's dealing with it in his own family.
Right.
and so I come to that, and so I want to say to people that you still need to engage people in conversation, because people can change their minds. Because I remember growing up, where my family, my dad and sister and brother and I, we would sit around the living room and we would eat at TV trays and we would watch CNN Crossfire. And dad always, he always plays devil's advocate, geez, that's where I get it from. Right. But I mean, there was one time there, this was again back in the early 90s. So I may have been in college, but anyway, I said, "So, Dad, what would you say if, because the hot topic of that time was gay marriage?" And I said, "What would you do if I came home and I told you I was gay?" I said, "Would you love me any less?" And he says, "I don't know," which is a very honest answer. And I came unglued. I said, "I cannot believe that you said that." But, um, and then, so again, talking about, I said, "You know what?" I said, then I got married in 96, and we were, again, the hot topic of the day was gay marriage, and we are talking about it. And I said to my dad, I said, "You know what?" I said, "You getting divorced does more to devalue my marriage than than two men who love each other, or two women who love each other getting married devalues my marriage. It doesn't at all. And there was then a day, and my dad's views have changed 180 degrees. It is clear as a bell where he is. He said, through conversations with you and with your wife and your sister, he said, I had no reasonable educational argument to back up what I thought. And he said, and he changed. I have a friend who is very conservative, Republican, and one day he said to me, because we were both teachers, he said, I'm really struggling with what I hear in church about when they're talking about people being gay, because I see my kids, my students, and I think, how can I feel that way? Because these are, like I said, these are his kids, and his pastor is telling him to believe a certain way, and he's struggling with that. So those interactions, those conversations, they do matter. It may be a long trudge, but it's not going to be one tweet telling somebody that they're full of crap. That ain't going to do it. It's going to be multiple conversations. But it does work. So sorry, that was a long anecdote, but Dad doesn't listen to the podcast, so it's all right. Like I said, I mean, I just, you got to have those conversations, because people like Pedro Pascal is going to, those anecdotes, that's going to change the world. So,
Right.
all right, what are we going to do next week that's not going to be so heavy and everything? We got to do something fun. We might, we'll come up with something. So, hey, so if you like what you're listening to, tell your friends they can find us on about any place they can get a podcast, and share it with folks. Dave, I haven't noticed, has our levels been okay? Because one of the things that drives me nuts, every time I listen to podcasts in my wife's car, I have to crank the volume to like about 35, and then I forget to turn it back down, and so she plugs in her phone and it blows out the windows. So I guess what I'm saying to the listeners, if you're finding that levels or anything, you have any feedback, if we can make it a little so you're not blowing out your windows, let us know. And if there's any topics you'd like to hear us kind of yammer on about, you can get us on Twitter, you can get us on Facebook. Let us know what you want to hear. So, but until then, we will say who dat.
Who dat?
Who dat?
It's going to be in the 60s next week, guys. So it'll be,
Yay.
yeah. But until then, have a great week. Wear your masks so we can do something on St. Patrick's Day.
McConkey.